My name is Father Brandon. I am a Catholic priest up in Virginia, Minnesota, and I have had the incredible blessing of working with Best Christmas Ever for the last 5 or 6 years. It came knocking on my door unexpectedly, and like anything, I at first kind of just discern and wonder, like, who is this organization? What is this organization? And the more I learned, the more I got into it, the more it captured my heart, and I saw the power of the Holy Spirit working through the organization and the way it impacts lives, and then to see the impact it had on my own church, my own congregation, my own parish here, and how it really lit a fire in our people and really put us on mission and allowed us to make a big impact. And so it's something that's just part now of our planning every single year, and I'm looking forward to just sharing how we do it, how that's come about, and just to help other churches, because it's one of the, if not the best thing we do here in our community, and it bears so much fruit in so many ways. So I look forward to sharing that, Don.
That's awesome. No, and one thing that you hit that maybe I didn't add to the agenda at all is, like, what are some of those things that is done in your church? Because I know, like, we've shared voice messages and stuff about that. What are a couple of things that jump out to you on what it's done to, like, with the congregation?
Yeah, some of the things that I think so often in churches, at least in my experience, so often we have like particular ministries to particular like age groups. So we've got the elementary, Sunday school, and then we got things for widows and widowers, and we got college students, and we got married couples, and we got all these different individualized sort of ministries in lots of our churches. And what I found with Best Christmas Ever, it's multi-generational. And we can have some of our widows that are 92 years old helping with this. And then we can have young kids that are 8 years old at our school that feel part of it. And I love the multi-generational component that's happened in our church, where I've seen people's lives really be touched, where I've seen people start coming back to church as they have experienced the beauty of a Best Christmas Ever drop. They're like, whoa, like they can tangibly experience the gift of God in their life. And in all different areas, from our school kids, again, to the elderly and everybody in between. I also like that it really gets us on, again, a mission together every Christmas season. I think often we get bombarded with so many different opportunities. For us, it works really well where I can just say, this is the family we are going to bless. We are going to go all in on this. Instead of like spreading it out everywhere, we're going to do something huge and impactful for another family. And it's somebody outside of our church, which I think is really good. We'll pick people in different towns even, all right? Because we're doing something for almost an unknown, all right? We know it's a son or daughter of God, and that's all that matters, is we are going to go and love them. And I found that very, very fruitful, it's not really like self-interested, like, oh, they're gonna know us. It doesn't matter. We're just gonna rally. We don't even know the face, and we're just gonna show up and surprise them. And I love that part of Best Christmas Ever and what it does for our congregation.
The part I loved last year, what you did is you actually got a whole bus, and I swear there was you had people like, with canes, you had people like, you had the older, you had younger, you had everywhere in between that it came out when you filled up that coach bus that came down to Duluth for it. And we're at a point now where people just talk about it, and so let's all go, and we try to get our whole church involved in it, so they all feel part of it. It's not just a select group of people. There's a select group of people that help me, kind of a team around me, but we try to get everybody engaged in the process, where it's stuff I preach about, it's stuff I talk about, and connect it to the gospel. All right, so it connects so nicely to what we're called to as disciples of the Lord, and it really gives me a tool in my toolbox to really inspire and engage people in the mission that Christ has called us on. That's awesome. One other thing that I remember from last season was the day after you guys did the drop, and you had the whole thing stirring of all these things that were popping in your community. Like, would you touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's really neat is it creates an awareness in people because I'm always saying, like, our whole life should be Best Christmas Ever, And I think just this year especially, I mean, I remember, I think maybe we talked about this, even the night after we did our drop, we found out the Quick Trip in Duluth, they said, anybody involved in Best Christmas Ever, we're giving away free hot cocoa and treats, and like this is like a business that had nothing to do with it, but they were so inspired what they heard was going on that it started creating a ripple effect, and then people get back into town and they're like, how can we go bless that waitress or that waiter, or how can we go help that guy on the street? And it creates just this sense of like awareness of how we can bless more people. And it just, there's so many ripple effects, and all of a sudden the next weekend I see 20 new faces at my church. And I'm like, why are you here? Well, we've been following what your church does for Best Christmas Ever, and we want to be a part of that. I mean, it's so beautiful what can happen if you just kind of let go and go all in, and God just uses it and really makes an impact on the broader community, not just our individual church.
That's awesome. So good. So a few things I'm thinking about are, so we're go through kind of like, what does a timeline look like with the church? And then also touch on what key people would need for like the planning process, as you're pulling this together, to have it clearly, spelled out to everybody.
Yep.
What steps are you taking to kind of get everybody fully involved and in on it? And then the last thing is I'll go through, ask if there's any questions, and then kind of next steps. So what does like the timeline look for you with doing the Best Christmas Ever?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's just really important is that, and we've talked about this, just Don and I, like, how do we create, we're thinking about this idea of Best Christmas Ever all year long. It's not just a quick, like, zoom. It started like that for us, where all of a sudden we're like, whoa, we got to pick family. We got to go. But how do we create a culture of giving in our own parish that we're always blessing people? Like, that's the first thing, like anybody out there that's watching, is that this is a tool, again, to help create something even greater. Now, as far as the specific timelines, what I start doing, again, this wasn't always at the beginning, but after doing this for 5 or 6 years, some of the practical things that I've kind of implemented here that seem to work, at least at our church, is usually I'm praying and really thinking about who I want to invite in as the first level of people that want to help with the discernment of what family we choose. And usually I try to think of who are, 6, 7, 8 people that I want to bring in to the conversation of who is God choosing for us? Not even us choosing. Who out there is God choosing for us? And how do we discern that? And so my first role as pastors, I feel like, is to discern who I bring into that team. And I'm at a point where every year I try to choose new people, because I don't want the same people all the time, because you can get in a routine of this is the way we did it last year, so we just do it over and over. When you bring fresh faces onto the team, I think it just brings a new sense of mission, and it doesn't become old, so you find some new people. And so I bring them in. After I pray about that, I usually invite them. And almost everybody says yes, because now they know about it, and it's like an honor to be asked to be part of that. And so then we usually get together, usually at somebody's home, and then we get together like the morning of or the evening that all of the nominated families are released, and we pray. And then I let those 8 or 9 people look through all the nominated families that are within a 60-mile radius of our church. And I say, go, just pray and read. And we take a half hour. I step away and I just go into another room and I let them be. And I usually just pray that God will just make it obvious. And then I come back and I ask everybody to write down. Last year I said, write down your top 5 families. All right. Who are the 5 families that you feel God is stirring in your heart? And then we sit around and everybody shares those names. And I just kind of keep an eye on how it's happening. And usually, honest to goodness, what happens is one family it's so obvious. Like everybody has that family on their list. And maybe there's 2, and then we just talk it through a little bit. We might do a little bit of like social media stalking of the family, or a little bit of looking, or some phone calls just to learn a little bit about the family. And then we come to a decision that day in which the families are released. And we say, okay, that's it. All right. And that's kind of the first step, I would say, is I start discerning. I bring a team together. And then the day the nominations are released, we're at it right away. And by the end of that night, we've honed in on that family that it appears God has chosen for us, or we've chosen. Does that make sense as a first step?
Yep, that makes complete sense. So now you get the family, you submit that family in, through our back end. Of course, if you're probably watching this, you'll have step-by-step on how that's done. What does that next step look like? So you get your family. What does your team look like? What is it, communicating? What's the communication look like within the church? That whole side, be interested in.
So I would say, yeah. So we would send in our choices, and the Best Christmas Ever will reward the family that it worked out, you know. Sometimes we've got our first choice, sometimes we've got our third choice. And we have to trust that God works through the Best Christmas Ever organization. So just any churches out there, I just want to make sure, like, don't get your heart so set on one family that if you get your third choice, it's disappointing. Like, you have to look at it and say, okay, this is the one, okay? And so I can't encourage that enough to embrace whatever family comes to you, okay? And don't overanalyze it. Trust the process, okay? And then after that takes place, usually what I've learned and what I've done here is I choose 2 people from that team to kind of like be my captains, so to speak, to be my leaders, to work and collaborate with me, because then it gives me 2 people to directly work with, and then they broaden it out to more people, okay? And so I usually choose 2 people to work alongside of me. We get together, me and just those 2 people, and then we put a little bit of a plan together, okay? And usually that plan starts with who's going to call the nominator of the family and talk to them, all right? Have a conversation with them. And sometimes those 2 people will get on a conference call and they talk about what can be done for that family. And to churches out there that are listening, when you call, you make it very clear that that person should tell you their wildest dreams for the family, all right? Don't limit it, all right? That's one thing I really believe why it's worked so well here is that we say, don't limit, just dream of what our church could do something miraculous, all right? The Lord could use us, all right? So dream big. And usually the nominator is like, no, that could never happen. And actually a lot of times it's happened. And so churches that are watching this, please make sure, like, you know what God can do. Like, my gosh, God, he opened the Red Sea. My goodness, he's God, all right? So don't doubt that. But after that those captains, my people, kind of meet with the nominator, then we start putting together a plan. Like, this is the dream. Let's figure this out. And then we set some goals. Like, here's what we want to raise. Here's how we want to, kind of the gift kind of proportion of it. And then we have a plan put in place. And then we start assigning, like, who's going to do this part? Who's going to do this part? And we kind of map out a little bit of a schedule. All right. And once that's done, then I'll come to the congregation and I will preach about it one weekend. And I'll say, it's Best Christmas Ever time. Here's the family. Here's what's going on. Here's our goals. Here's what we're going to do. And I try to get the whole congregation involved in the process. And then we always have tables set up, you know, kind of in our gathering space with information about the families. You know, we obviously try to be kind of anonymous, but we also want to be specific. And you got to find that fine line. And every situation is a little bit different. And we can talk about that some more. But then we tell our people, here's how you can help. Here's how you can give financially. Here's how you can pray. Here's some gifts you can give. What we've always done, we very often do a registry, which works well for us, where our parishioners, our people in our church can go, and there's a registry set up, and they can do that. They can drop off gifts at the church. They can drop off money at the church. And so then that just starts building and building momentum, okay? I'll take a break, ask any questions, Don, up to that point.
No, I think that's perfect, where you're starting to build momentum. You do one sermon on it and kind of give a very clear way for people to be able to help, and kind of it's really your vision plan, like planting that vision with them, to be able to everybody get behind and kind of rally.
And one thing, Don, that I just want to mention really quick is, and every church is going to have a little different way of doing this, but we try to create as many avenues for people to give as possible. That can be a little bit stressful and put a little bit of like additional work, probably on the Best Christmas Ever team a little bit, but also our business managers. And we're trying to figure out how to do, I don't think we've perfected how best to do this, but I like to give people the opportunity, if they want to stop by the office and just drop off a check to our church or drop off some cash and say, we want this to go to Best Christmas Ever. We have an account where that money all goes into, and then we take that money from that account and then put it into the Kindful Giving account, okay? One could just use Kindful and just say that's all we're doing, but I find, because people just tend to have a trust in our church, that they'd rather just drop off something with us than necessarily go to a Kindful Giving account and give. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's a conversation to have with Best Christmas Ever and with your own church, but those are things that we do here that I think help us even reach another level, because they feel as if they're giving to our church, but then we use that to help bless the Best Christmas Ever family.
Good. Now that you're on the path of giving, I'd be curious. I see, because I talk with a lot of different pastors and a lot of folks to bring in the church. And one thing is I think it might also be a scarcity mindset comes in sometimes, where it's like Christmas is our biggest giving time for the church. How does, you know what I mean? And now we're asking for this, you know, big thing outside of it. What have you seen kind of along those lines where it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Our Christmas giving has gone up more every single year we've done Best Christmas Ever. Like our giving to the church has gone up because, again, I mean, Best Christmas Ever, I mean, talks like generosity does inspire more generosity in people. And so in my experience, that as people are giving to Best Christmas Ever, they're wanting to give more in other places too. It's not as if this takes from this. And sometimes we can fall into things and think they're competing with one another, but they're actually not. It's just growing people's capacity to give. All right. And so we have to be very careful. And I preach to my people about this reality. It's like, once you grow your capacity to give this much, you don't go back to this. It just keeps growing. And so it's important for everybody to understand, like, it is not a threat to our operation. All right. We have grown exponentially in our giving at Christmas. And I think a lot of it is due to the tool of Best Christmas Ever. Like that just creates hearts that want to give to other things. And so we have found it's actually only increased the giving opportunities and the ways of giving in our people since we've started Best Christmas Ever.
Okay. No, thanks for sharing that. And I've just seen, like, it's been so neat watching folks take on even like little campaigns outside of it. Like, cause you just got it stirring so fast that it's like a lot of the littler stuff. I remember you'd said somebody needed a snowblower and it was taking a lot of the smaller stuff was automatically getting taken care of. You know what I mean? Where like sometimes you have you know, an account set up for doing that giving where it was just kind of happening, which was really neat.
That's really good. That gave me, that just elicit, because I forget so much. I mean, like the snowblower thing is a perfect example. Like there are people, I remember seeing on social media, somewhere in my town, there was a single mom and she was like, I need a snowblower. I don't know what to do. And she was all freaked out. And I just sent it off to our Best Christmas Ever people. And within like 2 hours, there was a brand new snowblower at her front door and the girl's weeping on her front deck. And she's not from our church. She was just somebody in town. And I just went to the team that just had done Best Christmas Ever and it was immediate. You know, and those sort of things, that's a perfect example of it happens. You know, there was 10 people that were part of Best Christmas Ever. They did went to a restaurant, everybody threw $100 in and they gave $1,000 tip to the waitress and she wept and, you know, just wept. And she sent a thank you to our church. And a lot of that came from Best Christmas Ever. And so that giving and that desire to help others, man, I mean, it just keeps our school kids. We've got a K-8 school here. I mean, our school kids, they raise thousands of dollars for these Best Christmas Ever things. And they get so inspired to help other families that have children. And what I see as a school is it's teaching our children how to be givers and how to tithe and how to help people. And if we can do that for young kids, it's building a generation of givers. And so Best Christmas Ever, again, it helps our young kids that they're more aware of how they can help other people. I would have kids after our services, they would come up and say, Father, here's my allowance for this week. Would you give this to the Best Christmas Ever family? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's working. Look at this, like the culture, the environment, it creates something that is so like filled with the spirit of generosity and the Holy Spirit of just going and helping others.
I love it. I love it. And I think you do such a great job at finding a spot for everybody. And nothing better than like everybody being together for a common goal together and everybody could speak to and everybody's a part of it, where it's you do such a great job at that. So then to move on to, so you end up, you have, just kind of recap a little bit, you bring together that group of 6, 7, 8 people, you were able to select which family, drilled down that the whole team kind of, you know, puts on everybody's heart. Then you narrow down who are like your top 2, you know, people with there. What things are you looking for there? Like, who are the people that you found, because you've been doing this 5 or 6 years, which, you know, what 2 people have you found that have been good at that role?
Now, some of this will be based on the personality maybe of the pastor or whoever's leading. Like, I know I need people around me that are organized and can stick to a schedule. Like, because I got so much and I tend to be a spaz and I'm not really ordered and organized. Like, I can inspire people and I can create a sense of mission. And so for me, I'm looking for a couple of people that can kind of like make sure they're hitting deadlines for Best Christmas Ever, because we want to honor the organization of Best Christmas Ever and do our best to work with them and like and know what's expected out of Best Christmas Ever. And so, but I'm also looking for people that are incredibly joyful, easy to work with, and have a big heart, the capacity to dream and to really not limit what can be done. You don't want to have an over-organizer that just like, it has to be someone that can live in being a little uncomfortable and being stretched. And because if you get somebody that's way too detailed, they can paralyze the whole situation too. And so really, I find it has to be a real middle ground of someone that is organized, but also somebody that can live in being a little overwhelmed for a few weeks and like has the time to run to Target and check the registry, that has the time to check how are we doing with this, what are we missing. Like, they can be joyful and they can be servants. And ideally, it's nice to have somebody that's been kind of part of the process before. It's not all brand new to them. I find like, oh yeah, last year that person was at the drop. They were really inspired by it. And they told me, could I be a part of it next year? You know, so I'm always being attentive to, like, even for next year, I've got a couple of people already on my mind that were so inspired this past year that I might bring into the movement this Christmas. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful. So just to kind of put dates down a little bit for people, if they're kind of, how does this time in dates wise? So September 1st, nominations open. They close November 1st, and you're likely doing that selection around November 7th, 8th, right around there. And then, so then you're start to plant the vision and going. So typically we do the drops about December, between December 17th and the 24th. What does that timeline look like in between? Like, what kind of things are you tying into the church bulletin, the, messages, the, social media? What different things are kind of happening in between there?
Yeah, between the, up to the drop, are you saying?
Yep, up to the drops. And you could even go into the drop too of how you prep, because I think you do such a great job at bringing everybody together. Again, I think you had well over 100 people at, more than that, of how you turn into an actually event to get everybody together.
Correct.
Maybe kind of talk through the communication and execution on that.
Yeah, I think, again, I mean, the most people coming through our church is always on the weekends. So we always want to make sure our weekends are very impactful in everything we do, but with Best Christmas Ever during that time, from the moment I kind of do the sermon and I make the announcement, every weekend, we have something that's happening. And I find you want to change it up a little bit every weekend, because if you do the same thing for 3 weekends, you can kind of lose a little bit of the flavor. And to make sure you have goals and let people know what's happening. Like, hey, like last week, you guys raised $30,000 for a family. Why can't we do 40,000 next week? And keep challenging people, and then explain, like, what are we doing? And we'll, sometimes we're like, we got everything off the registry, but what if we did this too? And so you're always like challenging to another level. You're never satisfied. Okay. There's never a weekend where I'm like, okay, we're all done. We've mission accomplished. We're always adding more. And so I think on social media, what we've done that actually the last 2 years has worked really well. We've created a private group. We've used Facebook. Maybe there's other ways to do this. A private group that we invite in all of our people from our church and anybody that knows anybody else, where that is a main communication tool. I'll find myself doing videos in the evening saying, this is where we're at, and trying to rally people and try to encourage people and share where we're at, set goals. And then people, there's just like there's like a small community that starts being built, and it goes beyond our own church congregation. Like, I don't even know how half the people get in there sometimes, but we try to make sure I'm very clear right off the bat that this is private. You ruin it if the surprise gets out. And we got to make sure we don't let the family that's going to be blessed into the thing. But I've seen family members of the family start coming in, and that's when it gets really cool, is the family you're blessing, when their family gets to see all that's building, it just is, it's transformational, because they get to witness the process, and it builds an excitement for that experience. So social media is really, really important. And I will do things kind of generically on my own page to try to like create like a kind of a wonder what's going on, and then that will lead into more of a private group. Okay. But then also, I learned this the hard way, like not everybody's on social media. So you don't want to completely isolate people that aren't there. And so we'll have things like, we'll print off like little note cards that people can take after church that kind of explain some things that are going on, or how they can bless people, or what they can do. And so we want to try to give people things, like people that are on social media. And so use as many like different means as possible. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. It takes a lot of work, but I think the more, again, avenues you use to get the word out, the stronger it gets.
That's good. Good. It makes complete sense because it's a lot of times easy to go back to that. If you're Facebook comfortable to keep hitting that. There's a lot of people where people have asked me before, Don, could you send me a booklet of, because they're in their 80s, but they love reading about the stuff, but they're not on Facebook or they're not on other places. So no, I love it. So maybe take me to the drop, and then we'll see if there's any questions. Walk through the drop and what does that look like on that end?
Yeah. And so, once you kind of start talking to the nominator a bit, you get a sense of like who the family is and what the situation is. And then I would suggest make sure you find somebody on your team that's got creativity. Okay. Like you want somebody that can be creative and kind of create a vision of how can we make this drop as impactful as possible? And how can that be big and creative? Okay. Because it is really incredible when you set up a little bit of a plan and then you pull all these people together and they get to experience the plan. I tend to kind of pray and think about it and think about how could we do this? And there's been things that we've done that like, it's just I come out of nowhere. I think it's a prayerful process. But then I think getting a group of people to help you accomplish whatever that plan is really important. It's tricky sometimes. Like, how are you going to get the family to the drop? Or are you going to show up at their door? How is that going to work out? Who's going to do that? You want to make sure you clearly communicate every little detail and think through every detail, because the more organized it is, the more it goes well. And every drop, I always look back and say, man, we could have done that a little bit better. We could have communicated that a little bit better. I could have said this a little bit better. So you always want to be evaluating how you do things. But I think the drop, you want to make sure that it's super impactful. Think about what you get to do, but it's so much more than gifts and money. Okay. You want to speak to the heart of the person that's suffering. All right. And you want to speak to their heart and say, like, our church, God brought you to our church, and we just want to bless you. And we want to show you the gift of God's love at this Christmas time. And so this is just a reminder of like, you're not alone and we're here. And those sort of words actually are the things that last even longer than the material things. Like the material things help, set the stage for their future, which is huge. But you also want to make sure it's not just about how much money did we raise, what kind of gifts did we give. Like you want a whole group of people that are like, we're just coming to just show them love and to show them goodness. Because a lot of these people have given up on humanity because of their situation. They've lost all hope. And when they get a whole group of people of happy, united, joyful people, it's game changer. And so there has to be a vision, and then you have to tell people what you're going to do. We always gather at our church before we go to the drop. Okay. I think that's a good thing. We all gather, we pray before we leave, and then we share what we're going to do when we get there. So that way everybody's prepared. They're not just wondering what's going on. And I find that really helpful. And then we've done a debrief often, depending where it's at. When we're done, we come back to the church to celebrate together what just took place. Okay. And so there's kind of three components. It's like, let's pray, let's talk about what we're doing, let's go do the drop. And then as we leave, let's all come back and celebrate and evaluate how the night went.
Oh, that's good. Some great tips. I know one thing I took away from 4 years ago, years I went on, where you'd surprise the single mom with where she had a house fire. Yeah. And that song, every time I come on, like that rescue song where you had she had, maybe you want to share that one quick? I love that.
Yeah, there's a beautiful song by Lauren Daigle, and there was a single mom went through kind of a tough situation in her marriage, and house burned down. She lost everything, and God brought her to our church, and brought her through Best Christmas Ever, brought her to us. And so we had this whole idea of we're just gonna rent an apartment or a house for a year and a half or 2 years, and we're gonna furnish it, and we're gonna fill it with food and just everything, so she doesn't need anything. We're gonna go all in. And we went to a furniture. This is another thing, like with businesses, go to your businesses. Like we went to a furniture store in town. They donated all the furniture for this whole house. It was incredible. If you don't ask, you're not going to get, and so we ended up, this song came up, like there was a day we were at the apartment and we were getting everything ready, putting furniture in, and like, it was incredibly exciting. And I got in my car, and when I got in my car, there was this song by Lauren Daigle, and it just spoke about, you're not forgotten, and like, I'm with you. And I remember listening to it, and I was like getting emotional in my car. I was like, this is like this song for this mother. And I just went with it. And that night we played that song and we did some pictures, and that song became like a theme for that drop. And that's the other beautiful thing. Like Don, like you said, when you hear that song, you think of that family, you think of that experience. It elicits something in you that's really beautiful. And that is the same thing for every one of my parishioners, my people in my church that were there. When they hear that song, they're immediately praying for that family and they're thinking of that family. So music has power, and don't be afraid to tie a song or some sort of music into that drop, because it has lasting effects for the future. Every time that mom and those kids hear that song, it brings them right back to that time where God blessed them.
Forever moments, that's for sure, where it's getting tied back to. Well, I'm gonna see. Well, thanks, Father Brandon. Really appreciate sharing all the different things. I got some good notes here myself to tie in. I'm curious if there's any questions. Hey, Philip, haven't got a chance to say hello yet. If we have any questions, and then next steps.
I was just gonna say, I know you've been doing this for so many years, but what's like one moment that you, like in all of the years, what is the one moment that you're like, this is why I'm doing this? Like, this is why I chose Best Christmas Ever, and I'll continue to do it. Is there like one moment that you can remember?
Well, I mean, I that moment that we were just talking about with Dawn, when we, that single mom at her house burnt down, I just remember sitting in that living room, and I still get emotional about it. Like, it was the most profound experience, because like this mom just felt so loved. Like, I mean, she tells a story now, like she was like considering taking her life that morning. Like it was so horrible, and she was such a place of darkness. And the same day that morning, she was in complete like darkness. Like that same night, God provided this incredible light. I didn't know that story until months later. But as that came out, I mean, it was like, it's like saving a life, like, and like, this mom is like in such a better place right now. It's unbelievable. And that's like, I have a lasting relationship with these families. Like, it's not just like dropping off and leaving. And in that moment, that night, I'll never forget it, because just her kids and her whole family was there. Her family couldn't help her. They didn't know what to do. It was difficult. And they were such good people. And they too were just, it just felt like we were all together in unity in a world that feels so disunified. I remember that night very specifically, where I was just, the way everything played out, it was like, God, your hand is on this thing. And I remember coming back to town, back to Virginia that night. I was like, I felt like the Scrooge converted. Like, I wanted to go downtown and just scream to everybody, like, how loved they are and Merry Christmas. So that night in particular always is something that really sticks out.
That's so good. One thing that was so neat about that too is this last year, they were sitting in the pew right in front when you had surprised the other family, and then they got to serve and pay it forward, where they were just joyful as heck. Where I think they clean the walls and paint and everything for a new home to be able to pay it forward. Where they were probably afterwards, the surprise, probably doing the same thing, yelling, love you to everybody and Merry Christmas.
That's one thing, Don, I just would mention too, that I found very fruitful after 5 or 6 years is, I mean, I have a best Christmas, someone did this for me this year, and it was so beautiful. Like, I have a Best Christmas Ever ornament on my Christmas tree with every last name of every family we've blessed. And again, like, these families become part of me, like, and part of our church. And like if you take on a family, like, if there's a church out there, like, don't see this as a one-time thing. This is a lasting relationship you build with a family. And I reach out to these families, even the families we blessed 5, 6 years ago. I don't know, like every few months, I just send a little note. How are you doing? We're praying for you. They've come and visited our church, and we've, like that long lasting relationship. And then all of a sudden, like, that's the cool thing that happened this year is all of 5 or 6 of the families we blessed, I sent out an email to all of them together and said, hey, I just want you to know, for some reason, our church has been able to build a relationship with your 5 families, and you have that all in common. And they built some cool connections amongst themselves. Like, there's this little community that formed of support, because they all know the experience, and like, it takes a lot to receive, but they all received so beautifully, and they know that experience, and it's changed their lives. And so to have that sustained relationship with them is another gift. that you have to remember. Don't see this as we're going to do a nice thing for a family. See this as a long-term relationship with whoever God brings to you this Christmas.
That's good. I have one question that I get quite a bit. It's like a lot of times churches, they're like, we already do a Christmas program of some sort, or it's like, but it's not like Best Christmas Ever. It's just like we have a group that does that. And they say, do you think we should do it? Should we not do it? You know, whether it be kind of like that same where like the resources side of it, where like, so the question would be, what would you say to a church that maybe has something put together right now, but it's like annual thing they've done for a while, you know?
I find I really appreciate working with and under the umbrella of Best Christmas Ever. I feel as if it takes off a little bit of the pressure, but it also it gives me a sense of being part of something bigger than just our church. Like, it's incredible to be able to say there's 200 or 300 or 400 or whatever. One day, 5,000 families being blessed, and we get to be a part of that. So there's this sense of just unity and being with others on mission. And I love every Christmas seeing all the little posts of other families that are being blessed and what other churches are doing and other businesses. And there's something really beautiful about being part of something that's bigger than just our church. That's something I really love. Can a church do it without Best Christmas Ever? Of course they can. You know, like, this isn't the end all be all, but I do think that working with the vision that God has given Best Christmas Ever and the organization that they have, it is just a real gift to cooperate. And I've grown and I've learned things through this process that have helped me in so many other areas of my life. And so it's always good to look at something like Best Christmas Ever and say, maybe I don't just do my own thing. I actually collaborate and I work with you. And I found that incredible. We could do our own thing, but there's nothing like, I'm telling you, friends, trust me. If you go all in and do a Best Christmas Ever experience, like, call me. I want to help. All right. You're not going to regret it.
That's awesome. No, thanks for that. And I didn't even think of that as I was thinking through my head about, you know, just thinking like going to a party. Yeah, you could have a party by yourself, but you could also have a couple hundred other people with you too, on that same, you know. Okay. Any other questions? Philip, there he is.
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, oh. You guys hear me okay?
Yep. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate you guys doing this. It's very helpful to us. Yeah, a logistical question. You know, so we do, obviously kind of hit on this just a little bit just now, but, you know, we do just kind of always during the season of Advent, just a bigger giving campaign. And I would love to, my first thought was, can I tie in, you know, this Best Christmas Ever with that? And logistically, like, so my question with that is, so we have this thing that just is kind of, you know, our people are used to in their rhythm of giving. And tying Best Christmas Ever in that, do you think this is something where we can just, you know, they can just give to that and then we can use whatever comes in and move it over to Best Christmas Ever? Or do you think it's something where it has to be two separate things? You know, you're either designate your giving for Best Christmas Ever or designate your giving for, you know, our normal Advent giving, which again, I mean, that creates more logistical problems. Or do you think it's fine? No, you just put it in there, you tie it into one of the things that we're joining in this year, one of the big focuses we have, this Best Christmas Ever, you know, just kind of tie it into what we're doing. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Can I just, like, what did your Advent campaign go towards? Like, roughly, I mean, what are some of the things that it goes towards?
Yeah, so there was usual, it would depend, right? As the years went through. Sometimes we would have a missions focus and we're helping an orphanage over in Myanmar, or sometimes it was something more local. Sometimes it was something very just practical, like the AC unit died on our, you know, our church building. We're going to use some of it for that. But when I was being told about this, and Father, you hit on this, is how I feel like there's been a little bit of a disconnect from our people from giving versus actual doing. Now, both are important, right? We're called to all of it, And so what I loved about this was, okay, so they're used to giving. I want to call them now to do even some more action and get involved and find a way to get them involved. So that's where I was kind of thinking, like, gosh, if I could tie this into what we're doing, they're kind of used to it, but then hit this whole new track, if you will, of best Christmas ever. And so that's kind of where my brain was thinking with it.
Yeah, I think, again, it's always tricky because I'm not like at your church or at your parish, but like my instinct is, like, again, and you're hitting on it, like in my heart, it's so easy just to write a check and say, hey, church, do what you want with it. Like, it's a whole different ballgame than investing in the relationship with the person that you're blessing, like through Best Christmas Ever. And like, you establish a relationship with a particular family and you're like engaged in personalizing everything. Like, honest to goodness, like we'll figure out like what is the family love, and we'll send them on their favorite vacation, or what's the favorite color. Like, we'll paint their bedroom that color, like the littlest things. And it's so personalized. And that's one of the things I love about it. My people can't just write a check. Like, they can, but we really want to personalize the thing. So I like your instinct of wanting to call them to action. And I don't know, like, one part of me wants to say, do your Advent campaign one year and do Best Christmas Ever the next year. Like, don't compete, so everybody can go all in on something. But also, I do understand the desire to want to like broaden that. And this, I don't think there's a right or wrong. My personality likes to go all in on one thing and just like knock it out of the park and just do one thing that's absolutely like life-changing, and not spread it out so much where it's a bunch of like, okay, that was nice, but just something that's just, and that's what I've found in our particular church. Like, before, we used to do a lot of different things, and I just cut those out and said, we are going all in. And I mean, and people think we're crazy. Like, this year we raised like $150,000 for one family. And people are like, that's a little excessive. And I'm like, does God withhold his love? like,
right.
Let's not limit what can be done. But there can be a little bit of pushback saying, could you imagine what we could do for 10 families? I'm like, that's true, but we made a huge impact and completely changed a family's life forever versus spreading it all out. And so you just have to kind of decide that. I mean, I think there's pros and cons going both ways. I'm not your pastor. I'm not in your culture. But I would say, if you could get to a point where you do it every other year, or maybe you just tried Best Christmas Ever, and if it completely flops, you go back to what you're doing before, or try it this year, do both. But I would suggest separating it, not just saying we're doing our Advent campaign and some of that money is going to Best Christmas Ever. You want to specifically get a group of people that are going all in on Best Christmas Ever, and I wouldn't merge those two things. That's my initial thought.
Yeah, I hear you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. But don't be afraid to reach out if you have questions and thoughts. I mean, all of our churches are so different, so you know your situation best.
And I think that is like that all-in mentality, though, where it's like, can't pick between a few different things. So it's like, let's just do it all. And then it ends up being like I think the ones that have had the most success are the ones that, whatever that campaign is, where you can send them into action, because it gives you the time to clearly articulate it. And the thing I found is, because you invited us up to the Mercy Tour that you had,
yeah.
You wouldn't believe how many people were so proud of being like together, like so many old, like, and they're so neat. Like, I almost get thinking about it. Little old couple pulls aside. They're like, that Father Brent, that dream's big, but then we all get together and we do it. All of us, and you could see them just glowing because they were a part of something where it was like, I think in just for myself, a lot of times I get like, things coming up in that where you forget where you can have it be so very clear from the beginning to the end, and then have the whole group be able to kind of talk, and because you kind of develop a similar language from it, like, doing the drop. Oh, did you know that they, like, with the dad with the running shoes, where you know, you see him out running, he's got 28 pairs of New Balances or whatever they were, which is just crazy. But
It's good.
hey, Phil, did you have one more in there?
No, I'm good. Oh, sorry, I'm probably still unmuted.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
Well,
I was gonna ask, because we have a lot of individual people that want to get their church involved. How is who's the best person to talk to? Like how to present it?
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
That's great. I mean, I mean, every church is going to have its own situation, you know. I mean, I think that, I mean, from my experience, it seems as if obviously the primary leader, the pastor, is going to have the most influence. But I also wouldn't want to say, if your pastor doesn't get on board, just don't do it, you know. I think you want to try to get your pastor on board, and I mean, have them call me and we can try to talk it through and I can share the experience. But in some ways, your pastor has to make that decision, you know, whether they're going to go all in or not. In regards to this, I think that's where you should probably start. But maybe your pastor, like that's not his gift, or that's not his charism, or that's not, don't let that stop you. Maybe you could just say, could we do this at our church? You know, I mean, honestly, I mean, this is the part of my story is I said no the first time somebody came here and talked about Best Christmas Ever. I said, I got too much going on. Like, I'm not going to get another organization involved. I was totally against it. I was resistant. A captain came to me and said, would you help me? And I was like, I can't go to my church and ask for more. Like, there's no way. And I look back and I'm like, that was the most crazy thought. Like, what if I didn't do it? Like, we would have never experienced all that we've experienced in the last 5 or 6 years. But as pastors, you get so much thrown at you and everybody's asking. There's a point where you just become numb to it all and you just like, ugh. And that's where I want to kind of just, as a pastor, just really speak towards Best Christmas Ever, that I initially was not ready to jump in. But I am so glad I did. I mean, it has been just transformational. And so talk to your pastor, and if at least you can get his blessing, then maybe you can start your own team. Like, you know, maybe you can do what I talked about. You get about 6-7 people from your church, you know, and just figure out what that role is going to be. But I think going to your pastor is really, really critical. Great question.
One other thing that we've seen too is groups take it on, and where we had certain, you know, where they do it for their Bible study group that into it and kind of take it on that way, where they were able, and that's been decently successful too. With and then especially if you could tie in the pastor's support or church's support in support of it, that maybe.
I love that idea. Like, if there's like small communities within the larger community, like Bible study groups or men's groups or women's groups or different things, like maybe you go to a place like that and say, hey, I learned about this Best Christmas Ever thing. What if our Bible study did this year? You know, that might be a nice way to start. And then maybe it grows out a little bit more, you know. That's a great idea.
It possibly a good way to multiply too. Because I think, Amber, weren't you at one where you had a group of
Yeah, River Valley Church in Apple Valley, Minnesota. We had 20 people join the small group. It was just called Best Christmas Ever Small Group, and everyone one person was assigned the lead, and then kind of delegated from there within the group. And I think it was the first year of doing it at the church, and people were very like, oh my gosh, is this gonna work? What is this? Like, what are we doing? What did we get ourselves into? But then after the drop, I think that's when it clicked. It's like, oh my gosh, like just to see the emotion of the family. And then from there, people are like, oh my gosh, we need to do this again. Like, we need to invite our friends and family in. So I think like just the initial one, like it's going to be scary to start it, especially brand new. But once you really see the impact, which you do with Best Christmas Ever, it will definitely grow within the church to different groups and more groups.
That's so good. I mean, there's been a couple times this year or over the last 5 years where, for some reason, after we've got into this, we were like, let's bless another family this year, you know, and a whole nother group of people within our church chose another family, and we ended up doing 2 drops, you know, and I like that because it does multiply, where some years it's been 1 we've gone all in, and then other times for some reason the Holy Spirit stirred us to pick a second family. And I think it's possible that it could be 3 or 4 depending on the size of the church and how you go about that. So I love that idea of just multiplying those opportunities based on every year. It should be a little bit different, and just seeing what kind of group you have together, what kind of resources you have, and what kind of families are available in your area. That's really good, Amber.
So many good nuggets. So many good nuggets. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, Father Brandon. Really appreciate you and just how you pour in. Like you wouldn't believe how many people you just inspired. You know, like, because one thing that we have, we have a captain's group where we have everybody in on that. So as we're going into the season, everybody's chiming and sharing, and it's always fun to see, like, what's Father Brandon up to? Where it's and it really raises it for all of us. Where somebody has, I remember when you had a $60,000 best Christmas ever, I'd said pretty confidently to you, this one won't ever be beat. This one, where you had broke your own record before that, and then comes back at 150, and now I can pretty confidently say that one's not going to be beat. That one's not going to get cracked. But what it's done is it raises the bar for all of us. So families all over, just in Minnesota, we're 100 cities. This past year, it's like your church was able to inspire 100 other cities to step up where they were at. So really appreciate you and just how you show up, and again, really grateful to have you as a friend, and to be able to work alongside this mission together. And
I really appreciate that, Don. And I think just two final thoughts that I just kind of are on my heart right now is, one is, I'm blown away again by the records and all these sort of things, but also remember, like, the goal isn't, we want to go, I'm all in, but we also have to understand, like, we should go all in on love, all in just prayer and commitment to these people. And the finances come because of that. Okay. We got to make sure we have it properly ordered, that our call and mission is to bring healing and love and light into the midst of a dark spot. And if that is what guides us, then, like, the support all follows that reality. Okay, and we trust that whatever comes in, that's what God intends for that situation. And so maybe there's churches that do that much, but also maybe it's less. And don't make sure you stretch yourself. You do all you can. Like, don't lower your expectations, but also don't base your success simply on monetary success. Okay, and that's what I tell my people all the time. Like, and that seems to work. Like, God provides, but it's out of that sense of mission, not primarily the financial side of things, okay? And then the second thing I just wanted to say, this is just on my heart as we were talking, and I don't know if this is going to bear any fruit or not, but if there's anybody out there that has, in your church, a family that needs to be blessed next Christmas, call me. And maybe I can tell you a family from my church. Like, how cool would it be that if we worked in collaboration with one another, and I said, there's someone here that I want to nominate, and I work with another church in getting them to bless a family in my community, and then you say, we have this family that's in hard times, and we work as churches together to bless different families. How neat would it be that church that's in Green Bay or whatever? They're a little far out, but what if they had somebody, they're like, this person, these people, and then we got to work together as churches, And I think we need more of that sense of unity and being together. And I just throw that out there. Maybe there's 10 churches next year. Maybe somehow we can bless people from our own congregations in some ways. Just a wild idea, something to think about. I think it'd be really cool, because I think of families in my church that know about Best Christmas Ever. I could never pull it on them, but if I found another church that wanted to do it, or another individual even, it'd be neat to be able to work on that side of things as well.
Well, in the part that I think so great about that, where I had, Josh that came up to the Mercy Tour, and he ended up getting out of his network 5 families that got picked. He picked up the phone and he reached out, and he didn't even know people were getting blessed. Like, he just got them nominated, and then ended up getting selected out of there. And he's like, you won't believe it. Like the Minnesota Vikings are showing up at this person's house, and they were, you know what I mean? Like, off of there, where it's like having that whole thing in unity, where it just kind of, it just ends up being a win. But one thing I thought of last thought, but I thought, like, you're so right about not just being about money. I was watching an interview last night about college coaches with PJ Fleck, and he said one of the worst things in the world is the college program wins games and the coach gets fired. Like, undefeated record and they get fired. He's like, how the heck is that even possible? The culture stinks, because everybody there, about it, like, you may be winning where it's not, where, like, focusing on, and I have a neat culture story for you. I was working with some people not far from you, another town or 2 towns over, and they had said that, this isn't you know, just so you know, this isn't like Virginia. Virginia is like the generosity. Virginia is the generosity capital of the world. So it's like what you've been able to cultivate is people think of it, they see it, they think generosity, they think helping each other. And it's so crazy because it's like similar jobs, similar stuff in a similar area, but it's been able to stir that thing and getting it full-fledged going. So really appreciate you, and just pouring in. Justin Spettle is in the house.
Hey,
How you doing, man? We were just wrapping it up. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I figured as much.
Bounce off Father Brandon.
Yeah,
he has time. We're already half hour over his time, but so I'm